to another edition of The Bookworm Mom with Shannon Grady. And today she will be discussing what book today?
It's going to be You Will Own Nothing by Carol Roth. Not the book I had initially planned to discuss today, but there was a comment made by Elon Musk last week. He said this on multiple locations, different podcasts and things, but I think this one comes from a comment that he had with the Ted Cruz podcast that he does. I think it's called Verdict.
So this doesn't have anything to do with my divorce lawyer, my first divorce lawyer, telling me what I'm going to look at? Okay.
That is correct. Although that might be true. Yeah, that's correct. It's funny because I read this book. It came out about 18 months ago, 2024. Great book. Another book recommended by Glenn Beck, so I got to give props to Beck. And so he's really good at recommending books to read. So I had read it some time ago, but it was a comment that Elon made that sort of triggered the memory. I was like, oh, wow, I wonder if this is somehow related to that. So I'm going to read what he said, and then we'll kind of go into how that relates to the book and why I think if you haven't read this book, don't put off reading it any longer. It's been over a year and a half. If you haven't read it so far, you need to pick it up now.
Fantastic.
But anyway, so Elon basically said we don't need to worry about saving money anymore. We can just, stop putting our nickels and dimes in the penny jars and all those kind of things and just put that to the back. And he said, quote, "Don't worry like squirreling money away for retirement because in like 10 or 20 years, it won't matter." He says that retirement is going to be irrelevant because the workforce will completely change in a few short years because he believes artificial intelligence is going to exceed the intelligence of all humans combined by 2030.
Wow.
Yeah, wow was right. And he goes on to say in the interview with Ted Cruz that tens of billions of robots that will make you anything or provide you any service you want for basically next to nothing. So that kind of got me thinking. Now, first of all, let me be fair. Lots of people disagree with Elon Musk. Yeah. I tend to be one of those people. But anyway, he says by 2030, that was sort of the date that kind of set me off because if you pay attention to some of the things that comes out of Davos and the World Economic Forum, they have something called the 2030 Project. Mm-hmm. And that project was what led to Carol Roth writing the book, You Will Own Nothing. And so in deference to my husband, who mentioned last time I need to give more information on the author, let me do that. So I'm just going to read a little bit of what Carol says about herself in her own book. She says she is a recovering investment banker, an entrepreneur, a TV pundit and host, and a New York Times best-selling author. Her books include The Entrepreneur Equation and The War on Small Business. She's worked in a variety of capacities across many industries, including currently as an outsourced CCO, director of public and private companies, and she also advocates for small businesses, small government, and, of course, big hair. Oh. So that's a little bit about Ms. Roth. She's relatively young. I think I mentioned that when I saw her after having read the book, I thought, wow, this is not what I pictured in my mind. I don't know. I'm a nerdy old history teacher, so I sort of pictured somebody more like myself. But that's the case. So good for her. But in the 2030 Project, the line that caught her attention was that you are going to own nothing, and yet you're going to be happy. So, Trip, if you own nothing after your wife took everything, you were happy, right? That's the happiest you've ever been.
I don't recall being happy.
So anyway, that took her into the direction of what does it mean to own nothing and yet somehow you're happy in this utopian state. Yeah. And anytime you hear the expression utopian state, it automatically should call up.
Yeah, the little hairs on the back of my neck raise.
Statism, all the different ways that they describe the same thing. And so she kind of starts off the book, again, no surprise, talking about China, because China is, currently the most prominent communist nation. I mean, the Soviet Union collapsed, and so therefore they don't get to go around and say, look, it worked so great. We collapsed. It worked so well. And so she talks about China creating the social credit system when you get a score based on how you do certain things. And I kind of highlighted some of that in the book. I won't read everything to you because, again, you need to get this book and read it. But she talked about if you didn't go visit your grandparents, you could lose points
Wow.
for that. And I thought that's pretty crazy. And they essentially have their phones track them everywhere they go. I think if I read correctly, it wasn't in her book, but another book that I've read, and I've read so many, but they talk about how there is one camera for every 2 Chinese citizens. And that's significant, folks, because you're talking about 1.3, 1.4 billion people.
Exactly.
That's a lot of cameras.
Yeah.
So you're not going or doing anything that they're not seeing or hearing you do. So with these phones, one of the things that I thought was interesting was that during the COVID period, she details a story of a guy who goes to get on the train to go somewhere, and he has to scan his phone, and it says, green, yep, you're good to go. You're not COVID infected. You've not encountered anybody with COVID, whatever. Goes on his journey, but he apparently was engaged in some form of protesting about how the government was handling COVID in China. And I guess while he was on the train, that information was filtered. And so when he goes to get off the train and he has to scan his phone again, it's now red, which indicates you have to be quarantined until they tell you that you're not required to be quarantined anymore. Even though he didn't have COVID, was not in contact with anybody with COVID. So goes to red, and then he finds out later, you got caught. And so how interesting would that be? Think about what's happening with the ICE protesters around the country.
Sure.
If they had to use their phone to buy groceries or go whatever. As much as I think these folks have taken it from protesting to, I don't know what you want to call it, violence. It's not protest. Is when you use your voice, and you can use your pocketbook too. You can choose not to support financially or whatever. But when you are getting into the faces of officers, law enforcement, and trying to impede them from doing their job, that's not protesting. That's something else.
No, but again, we can compare, say, for instance, the Canadian truckers under Trudeau.
Yes.
And they did actual protesting. But his reaction to it, of course, I also have friends on the left to point out that that they impeded the traffic
Highways
and things like
roads,
that,
yeah.
and so on. So they do have a point there, but the backlash of debanking them, and again, it's almost like a social credit score. They went after them, their families' jobs,
Yes.
ancillary families. I mean, aunts, uncles, parents, and grandparents. So it's vicious. It's absolutely vicious when a government tries to be the arbiters of societal norms.
Yeah, and truth. They try to tell you what's true and what's not
yeah.
true, which kind of brings me into one of the other things she talks about in the book. Back in 2022, I'm sure most of us remember the Department of Homeland Security under the Biden administration created what they were going to call the Disinformation Governance Board,
Yes.
which those of us who've bothered to read the book that Orwell wrote called 1984, we called it the Ministry of Truth.
Yeah.
Which, if you haven't read that book, that's a classic book that you absolutely have to read. Anything he's written, you need to read, but that one you need to read because I kind of jotted it down. The Ministry of Truth is really code for the Ministry of Lies, because that's what they are. The Ministry of Peace is actually about war. It's not about peace at all. And so I thought, well, how interesting that they create in that book something called the Ministry of Peace, because they want it to sound nice, even though what it's actually doing is not nice. Juxtapose that to what we did here with the Trump administration, changing it from the Department of Defense to the Department of War, which I felt like that's a truer assessment of what that department does.
Right.
So, yeah. And then, of course, Ministry of Love is actually about torture. And then the Ministry of Plenty is really about, starvation.
It's kind of like our Ministry of Education in the United States.
Which is really the Ministry of Indoctrination.
Exactly.
Exactly. Honestly, that was the book I was going to talk about, which would have delved into that. But we'll get to that on another episode. But, so it's really interesting to see that. And so to that end, funny enough about the Ministry of Plenty, this is a little sidebar from the book, I saw on X yesterday, someone had put up a video that they've opened one of the grocery stores in New York that's free. And there was a line around the corner, down the block, 3 blocks. Now, I'll be fair with you. This could have been AI generated. It's so hard to know these days what's real and what's not real.
Yeah.
But anyway, they showed this very, very long line of people waiting to get their free food. And then they go into the store and they just kind of do a really quick pan of the store. And I laughed and I said, well, I hope that that's not legitimate because that food won't last the day. There were like 2 milk crate sized boxes with some single bananas that they had broken off, probably about 30 boxes of cereal, and there was only one kind. It was Cheerios. So this was a legitimate communist, store. There's no variety. There were about 8 containers of orange juice, and then a little, another milk crate with apples, and then one of plums. And so I said, so basically, they said they were going to ration these things. I said, yes. So you come in, and they say, you can have box of cereal or 1 banana, not both.
That's right.
Comrade, come back later for more. You get 1 banana. No, not 2.
Unless you have a moose and squirrel. Then you get to have 2.
Then we trade. Okay, no problem. But yeah, so it was just, it was interesting. So again, to be fair, folks, I don't know if that could be AI generated. Lots of discussion about whether or not we should start having some kind of symbol that lets you know this is not real, this is AI generated.
That's true.
But it's just interesting that's the kind of thing we can expect to have. Now, going back to the book, he talks about a lot of things, and if you don't know who Ray Dalio is, you need to know him. He's a billionaire, and he's written several books. And he talked specifically about sort of the history of civilization, how Rome fell and how then when you move up into a little more modern period, if you will, the Dutch used to be, a lot of people don't even remember that, the Dutch used to be the world economic giant.
Yeah, the traders of
the Dutch East India Company, yeah. So you had those guys, and then, of course, they fall away and they give power over to the Great Britain. So the United Kingdom becomes the next great powerful economic force, military force. And then at the conclusion of World War II, drum roll please, we now have the United States of America has now taken supremacy. And part of that was because it is cyclical. You can literally watch history and notice this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and that leads to the following things.
Yeah.
So he's kind of said the United States is on the downside of that cycle. So it's not a good thing. So we're not at the peak of our power. We are on the declining end of it. And that doesn't mean I'm not patriotic. That doesn't mean I don't love my country. It just means I'm a realist and I know how to read history. So one of the first things that happened is, of course, gold was decoupled from the dollar. We used to be on the gold standard. And so they were arguing about, well, we're getting low on gold because people can come in and exchange their dollar for, I think it was $35 worth of gold for $1, something like that. 35 pounds, whatever, ounces. Ounces, yeah. And so they decoupled it, and that was done on August 15th, 1971 by Mr. Richard Nixon. So, and it was on the gold standard for a bit, and then it ended up switching from gold over to the petrodollar. And of course, then you got your OPEC countries, which are all Arab nations. And so, if anybody remembers the 70s, we had the conflict, and then the United States said we're going to support Israel. And I think what was that conflict? Oh, gee, Yom Kippur War. Yeah, Yom Kippur War. So we gave some money to Israel. That made all the Arab nations angry, and so they jacked up the price of oil. And that's when, remember, Carter said, "Yo, wear a sweater."
Yes, I do.
There was rationing of fuel and car lines and everything else in the 70s. So that was certainly a problem. And of course, now the dollar is basically it's fiat. And if people don't know what that means, there's nothing really backing the dollar anymore other than the strength of our government. And so that's very concerning.
Which used to be measured in GNP, but now we've even screwed that up. Yep.
The Fed, anyway, that's another subject for a whole day. I could bring in here and talk about the Fed, and we might get to that. But it's interesting because as she kind of goes through the books and sort of just lays out what's happening and how the dollar's being devalued, it is striking to, again, see all of these little things being ticked off. So I'm going to read this to you real quick. This is in Forbes. He said in his documentary, In Money We Trust, quote, time is a fixed measure, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute. But imagine if that floated each day, 50 minutes in an hour one day, 80 minutes the next. We know intrinsically that would make life chaotic. So why do we not understand that the dollar devaluation is the same thing? I mean, if you go into the store one day and your dollar buys you a loaf of bread and you come back the next day, you're like, hey, I'm sorry, you don't have enough. I need $3 now for that same loaf. Mm-hmm. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And supposedly have these really smart people. But then you take a look at what happened in Munich this past week, and you see people like AOC making ridiculous statements like, well, Marco Rubio said that Spain is where we originate the Cowboys. Well, he needs to talk to the Mexicans and the blacks about that. And I'm like, does she not know where the horses came from?
Yeah.
They speak Spanish in Mexico. Anyway. And then she said something about countries below the equator because I guess apparently she thinks that the countries in Central and South America. Anyway, she doesn't know history. She doesn't know geography. She doesn't know the Constitution.
Economics, yeah.
So, and she did major in economics. So we can only imagine the brilliance that we'll get from her. And she, I think, plans to run for president. So, woo, exciting times ahead.
Yeah. Well, she was there shoulder and shoulder with Gavin.
Yeah. They're both him and his knee pads. So great stuff. So again, she kind of continues on with talking about China because China seems to be the center of all things Marxism right now. Mm-hmm. So along with the social credit score, which is an individual kind of thing that follows you, they also wanted to do something at the corporate level. And so they came up with this ESG score, which was environmental and social corporate governance. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was this big push for, companies need to have this really good score and demonstrate that you did, I don't know, you recycled or whatever. You didn't have a big carbon footprint. Do you remember that? That was a big
DEI hiring and all these other points, Yeah,
and if you didn't do these certain things, you got marked down. Well, it had such a backlash, the term ESG, that they then said, okay, well, here's the problem. People don't like ESG. They've caught on to it. And now they don't say ESG anymore. They have changed it. Let me see if I can find what it is they changed it to.
It's like the old, apple to an orange.
Yeah, let's ESG changed to, here it is. So now they call it things like sustainability, rebranding the terminology to things like resilience, sustainability, responsible investing, just investing. It's the same thing, same animal. They just call it by something else. So that is something that she kind of lays out that we need to focus on that because that's another way in which they're trying to redistribute the wealth. So having read this book and then taking a look at what's happening, one of the things Congressman Tim Burchett out of Tennessee had a podcast, or not a podcast, he does these little video things where he talks on X, and he said, listen, isn't it interesting that the Democrats are having a real fit about some funding, and some of the funding they've wanted to cancel, it was like $14.5 billion that was going to go to fund the Coast Guard, and they don't want to fund the government. And he said, that number's interesting because that's the exact number that we deduced was how much they had basically mismanaged, stolen, what do you want to call it, defund, sent it to Somalia, whatever, for same amounts.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, we'll just transpose these two things, and So I feel like in some ways, Barack Obama has been successful in implementing his redistribution of wealth, which of course isn't his, and again comes back to the Marxist. So they're really strongly advocating that we take American money and spread it around. He famously, at the end of his term, sent a pallet with about $1 billion in cash to, of all countries, Iran, because we're real good friends with Iran. Oh, wait, we're not.
Yeah.
So, again, that all of this, each of these elements, even though they seem to be distinct and separate from the big picture, they form a perfect puzzle. And so these books and these authors and these stories and these events, they're not separated. They're really all on a linear thing. It's a line that they're all linked together. So I think this goal of sending money to Iran, sending money to Somalia, where they've basically taken this money they stole up in Minnesota, and they've allegedly used it to rebuild cities like Mogadishu and other cities in other foreign countries. We have been sending at least $40 million a week to the Taliban, which we know is funding all kinds of things that we aren't happy about, including a lot of terrorist training camps. We actually are paying the widowers and their family members of the Taliban and other terrorist groups who we killed during the global war on terrorism, we're paying their widowers a living stipend because what? Yeah, that's what we're paying. That's what our tax dollars are paying.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that the ways in which they want to try to steal things. One of the things she kind of drives home is the greatest source of wealth. You know, they always talk about we're going to tax rich, tax rich, tax rich. Well, I think somebody had done this and said, listen, even if you taxed them at 100%, it wouldn't even be a drop in the bucket to pay, you know, the national debt.
Right.
The largest amount of wealth is actually currently in the hands of baby boomers who are leaving us in droves every day.
Yeah.
So that wealth is not held in the pockets of billionaires. It's held in the pockets of middle class and upper middle class. Now, there are some other wealthy people as well, but you know, people like my mom, to that end, they want their hands on that money. So that's where you start hearing them say things like, well, we need to start taxing unrealized capital gains.
Yeah.
And people say, well, what does that even mean? Okay, well, let's do some real basic math. Okay, if you purchased a home for $100,000 and you go to sell it in 5 years and it's now worth $150,000, well, your realized capital gains on that is $50,000 because you paid $100. Now it's $150,000. What they want to do is they want to say, okay, you purchased this home for $100,000. It's now 10 years later, or 5 years later, whatever it is. It's now worth $150,000. So we're going to go ahead and tax you on that $50,000. Even though you didn't sell the home, you still live in it. You need to pay tax on that. Well, a lot of folks can't afford to do that.
Right.
Because they don't just have that extra money sitting in a bank account somewhere that they could pay. Because if they did, guess what they would do? They'd tax that too. So the only way they could possibly pay the tax on that quote-unquote unrealized capital gains is, can you guess?
By grabbing the title to that property.
Yeah, they'd either have to sell the home, which means they don't have that money anymore because they have to sell the home to pay the tax on it. And once they do that and they pay the tax, they don't have the money to buy another home. It's just, it's sort of like when the market was really booming, and I think the interest rate got down to like 2.25%, 2.5%. I think we got a pretty incredibly low interest rate, but then it kind of plateaued and sort of fell off. Now I could sell my house and make a ton of money off of what I made. But if I wanted to purchase another one to replace it, I'm also going to pay like 3 times the rate that I currently have. And it's going to cost about twice as much as what I paid for my house now. So it doesn't even make sense. So again, if you are a person you're retired, you're 75, 80 years old, and this is the home you've lived in your entire life since you were married, whatever, in your 30s, 40s. If you go to sell that home, you can't even begin to find something anywhere comparable that you could purchase and then move into.
Right.
So that is a thing that the government is sitting back kind of gleefully with their fingers going,
yeah. And one of the arguments that people have counter to it, of course, is they're saying, okay, so it's worth $150,000 now, but you have to now calculate what the depreciated dollar is.
Exactly.
And then they're like, we depreciated the dollar and stole that money, and now you want us to give it back?
Exactly. Because, the same $100,000 that bought that home when you were 40 years old and now you're 85, it's not worth the same amount.
No. It's worth $50,000. Yeah. And then they're like, well, wait a minute, that takes away the $50,000 that we were trying to steal back.
No, exactly.
That's
exactly.
Right.
So one of the things that she does is she talks about that, they want to take your wealth. They want to do as much as they can to have even an inheritance tax.
Yeah.
I mean, they've come up with all kind of ways in which to steal your wealth.
Yeah.
Now, there are some governors and other folks. I've even heard Trump say a little bit of this, but the best governor that I've heard on the subject so far is not ours, unfortunately. It's not our South Carolina governor. Henry McMaster is disappointing, but Ron DeSantis down in Florida.
Yeah.
Has been a big advocate that when you purchase a home, that's your home.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to keep paying taxes on it for the rest of your life.
You shouldn't rent your own home. That's correct.
Yeah. In fact, to be fair, you shouldn't rent anything. Once you pay, you buy it and you pay the sales taxes one time,
Yep.
you should be done. It shouldn't be, we're going to tax you again on the next year, and then again, and then again, and then again.
Yeah.
So like you said, you're renting it. You never really own it. And if you don't pay your taxes, or for some reason you're not financially able to pay your taxes, then they just come take the whole thing and auction it off for
Yep.
pennies on the dollar.
Yep.
Very unfair system. But I know you have a libertarian background, and of course, there's one area that you and I definitely agree on, and that is all taxation is
Theft.
yes,
Yes.
it is theft. Now, I will say that I do think we need to have infrastructure. We need roads, and we need a defense against foreign intrusion, and so on and so forth. And that does require some sort of tax dollar base, whatever, to be able to fund that. But the things that we currently fund with our tax dollars, which is essentially, again, we are redistributing our wealth. Now, we aren't. The politicians that be are redistributing our wealth to other nations. That needs to stop.
Yeah.
I mean, like yesterday. So she kind of lays out that. And one of the things she says you can do to help fight against this is she talks about setting up trusts and doing estate planning. And a lot of folks, if they're like, oh my God, what's it, that trust? It's not, you have to be like a millionaire to have a trust, don't you? No, you don't. You really don't. What it does is it helps protect you against some of the taxes and things that you would have to pay. And it also protects you against some courts. Let's be honest, we have found, even here in South Carolina, some folks have been nefarious in their handling of estates. Individuals that are deemed mentally, incapable of continuing control of their financial means and states and things like that.
Hey, I'm sitting right here.
Right. But, I know the Hannahs had something similar happen where her mother-in-law essentially went to the bank, get some money out, and she called her son up. And she said, my card doesn't work. I can't get any money out. And he thought, oh, okay, Mom's probably taking out more than $500. There's a limit on how much you can take out each day. Long story short, they go to the bank. Nope, she has no money. And she was a millionaire, multimillionaire.
Yeah.
So they kind of track it back. And so what happened, this attorney was appointed by the state. They declared her, not mentally competent. So they took away her power from her, and they gave the power of attorney, if you will, to the state. And then this attorney was placed over her estate, and so he was charging her estate like $2,000, $3,000, some ridiculous amount a month, and he just drained out all of her money. And this was completely unbeknownst to her other son.
Yeah.
Now, the one son did know. When they finally tracked this down and they caught this attorney who had done it, he actually committed suicide. He killed himself.
Yeah.
But then they put another one in there. So they're still fighting it. It's deplorable. So that's the kind of thing that they want to do. That's what the government wants to do. They want to take your money, and they know best how to spend your dollars. You don't know how to best to spend them. So again, estates and trusts are not just for people who are millionaires. My mom had a significant amount of land, and so she's put her property and assets and things of that nature into a trust. As long as she's living, she is the trustee. And at such time as she passes, and she's 81, I don't want to see her go anytime soon. I've told her she has to make it to 100. That's our agreement. So, I love my mom dearly. But so she's set it up so that, when she passes, there'll be a trustee, that a family member who then kind of takes over. But her instructions will be followed. It's not like he then gets to determine how things will be doled out. She's already written that down. It's already set aside. So if you don't have a will, you don't have a trust, even if you don't have anything more than a family home, you need to put that into a trust, because it's going to put some protections in there against the taxes that will eat away at what you intended to leave to your kids.
Right.
And real estate is one of the biggest wealth. I think I can't remember what this. It's probably more than 70% of the wealth that they want to take is in real estate.
Yeah.
I mean, is it any secret or surprise that Donald Trump made his millions on real estate?
Real estate? No, not at all.
Yeah, it's a lucrative business. And Ralph Norman, who's running for governor, he's the same guy. He's also been successful as a real estate guy.
Well, a lot of people don't realize Ray Kroc of McDonald's.
Yeah.
That it wasn't selling hamburgers. It was where there was a real estate that they put those hamburger sales on that made him his billions of dollars.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's It's interesting to watch this, but I think that people need to be paying attention to what's happening. Because of what Elon said, and because I've read this book, and I can kind of see how the two things overlap. If you're not going to be required to save money because you're gonna own nothing and be happy about it, because there's going to be an AI robot who, if you get sick, they come in and they give you the treatment that you need, and if you need surgery, they also perform the surgery because they're smarter and more capable than a human surgeon would be.
Yeah.
If you need transportation somewhere, you'll have an automated intelligence vehicle. WeGo, they'll pick you up, take you where you need to go, and rather than you owning that vehicle, it'll be sort of like a taxi service for people in the neighborhood to go wherever they need to go.
Well, it also occurs to me that this is another attack on rights.
Yes.
And they don't want them to be God-given rights. They want them to be rights that are given to you by the government.
Yes.
And one of the ways they can do it is by saying, well, if we can't figure out a way to usurp property rights, let's take away the property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Elon said something the other day, and the guy's brilliant, but he scares the crap out of me.
Yeah, same here.
He says, and he said this so matter-of-factly, he goes, well, there's a lot of injustice in our justice system, and it's true.
Yeah.
You see judges letting out, people with 14, 15, 16, 17 arrests, violent charges, certainly the example in Charlotte, the young lady that was stabbed and killed by a guy who should never have been on the streets.
Yeah.
He should have been behind bars. And that's repeated over and over and over again. So he said, well, we don't need to have human judges. We can have AI judges who will then have no human emotion involved. They will simply interpret the law, look at what the punishment or maximum minimum sentence is, and then based on your behavior or actions or whatever you did, whatever crime you committed, you get sentenced to that. Done deal. I don't know why, but that really bothers me.
Oh, yeah, because, when you take away some of the nuance that could come up with it, circumstantial nuance.
For me, it's like, go back to the chat GBT. There has been numerous studies done to show that there's problems with that. You got a lot of young people committing suicide because this thing is saying, kill yourself. You should kill yourself. You should definitely kill yourself. Life's not worth living. You should kill yourself. And it's little kids have killed themselves.
Yeah.
So what intelligence these artificial intelligence glean comes from you and I. It's our intelligence that they've then read through all the books that have been written, and they've read through all the input put in by humans. And some of the people include people like AOC, who believe that cowboys and Indians, horses came from Mexico, not Spain, and that, Mexico is below the equator or whatever. I'm like, what is she smoking? We should offer drug tests to the members of Congress, and if you fail, you get kicked out. That would probably take out half of them right there.
That's
and then we give IQ tests, that takes out the other half. So there you go, guys, whatever.
that term limits right there.
Yeah, exactly. Term limits, we don't even need them anymore. We just have these two things, a drug test and an IQ test, and they all fail. But so again, this is it was a book that came out in 2024, but she talks about the 2030 project, and again, when Elon said by 2030 all of these things are going to be here, and you won't need to save your money anymore. I kind of did some just simple thinking. So to me, the first things that I imagine artificial intelligence would replace would be things like agricultural. We're not going to need immigrants to come pick our oranges or strawberries or whatever. They'll have machines that do it quicker, faster, cheaper, more efficiently, etc. So I looked at countries that had large populations, and India was one of the first ones I looked at. And roughly, if you take India and Pakistan, you're talking about over 1 million individuals who work in the agricultural field in some way, shape, or form. Not necessarily in the field per se. Maybe they're in the shipping of it or whatever, containers or whatever. But they work something to do with ag. So if you take away 1 million jobs from people in India and Pakistan, and those people tend to be males, particularly in that region of the world. Women don't typically work in agriculture in that particular region. Those guys are going to be somewhere between the ages of, say, 16 and 55. 60. So what do we typically refer to people in that age range? They're called military-aged men.
Right.
So you're going to take away their job and tell them, hey, we don't need you to do this anymore. Now, they don't have the education or the training to do something else. Remember what they said to do if you were in the oil pipeline industry a couple years back? They said, learn how to code.
Yeah, which is one of the first things being replaced by AI.
That'll be gone by the end of this year, according to Elon. The end of this year, we won't need coders anymore. So that job's defunct. So what are 1 million of these guys going to do if they don't have jobs anymore? Now, people say, oh, well, you'll have a universal basic income, UBI, universal basic income. Everybody's going to get paid a living allowance.
I thought you were going to say open a 7-Eleven, but go ahead.
Now, that was racist. Shame on you.
Terrible.
We won't need people to do that either because, I'll do that too.
That too, yeah.
So you're going to have a lot of idle hands, and I'm a Christian, so I believe that the Bible specifies that it's not good to have idle hands.
Yeah.
That leads to you doing things you shouldn't do. And we've already seen instances of roving gangs of young men in places like the UK, and they get up to things that are not good, particularly if you're a female. They're not good. So I'm concerned about that, and I don't think it bodes well. Various experts in the field of AI have come out and said, the first couple of years of this are going to be a little rocky.
Yeah.
You think? So you may not need to save your money in 10 or 20 years, but I would encourage you to save your weapons and your pew-pew.
Yeah,
Go
that's
stock
right.
up because you might need that.
True.
So anyway, that's kind of a rough down and dirty review of the book You Will Own Nothing by Carol Roth. I mean, there's been so many people that have talked about this book already, but again, I want you to think about how that book plays into this 2030 project that's come out of the World Economic Forum, aka Davos, and I mean that in itself carries a bit of a nefarious undertone.
Yes.
So if you haven't read this book, please go read it. The next book I've purchased deals directly with AI, and if I remember the title, it's something to the effect of "If they build it, everybody will die." Something. I mean, it's pretty. Bum, bum, bum.
But they won't come. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. They will come. You'll all die.
Die.
So I'm gonna read that book next, and then we'll probably talk about that. But next week, I'm excited to say that courtesy of Tripp here, who purchased a book for me, High Heels and Handguns.
Yeah.
By Lisa Hartman. She will be joining us in the studio.
Oh,
We're going to talk about her next book coming out that's going to coincide with this particular book, so it's part of the series. I think the actor, or the character rather, is Kate Hudson, if I remember correctly, or Kate Howard. It might be Kate Howard. But anyway, so that'll be very interesting. I look forward to that. She's a local author, so hey, we got some talent right here in the state of South Kakalaki.
Fantastic. Well, that's been another fantastic episode of The Bookworm Mom, coming out every Friday. Make sure you visit her page and go to libertycrackmedia.com for more information.